It is a matter of great privilege and pride for me to discuss Mr. Kenneth Pala from GIZ. He is also available. A hearty welcome to him. He has come all the way from Delhi for this today's program. I have pleasure in welcoming my colleague, Ms. Imtian Lao. She is Deputy Director General in Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. I will request Reverend Nuklu, if he is around, to join the dais, and also Gwasillo Thong from Sandini village, if he is here. They are, today we are here. What you can right claim to be one of the mega hotspots for the biological diversity. All across the world, Myanmar, mega biodiversity hotspot. So this kind of celebrations started importance of biodiversity. Nagaland is so important for this particular subject on the biodiversity. Here, since we are falling under one of the mega biodiversity hotspot, then because of the varied climatic conditions, varied geographical features, the richness of species is much higher compared to the rest of the country. Therefore, it becomes more important on our part to ensure that all our actions are directed that such species diversity is concerned. It is a matter of part, satisfaction and heartening that despite land and resources being wasted with the people, we have shown a successful example before the country. Now you can very well take, pride that our forest cover is much higher than the national average. Recently, one Indian Status of Forest Report 2021 was released, and the scientific study showed that almost 75% of the geographical area in Nagaland is under the vegetation. Such stage has reached not because the departments and government has done incessantly for that. It has been made possible because the people who are living in the interiors, the people who had seen the forestry and the conservation since time immemorial, they have contributed for it. It is a matter of great pleasure to share with you almost 127 number of community conservation areas. They have been notified in this state. Look at the size of our state. We are one of the smallest states in the country, but when it comes to the community conservation areas, we are the leaders, we are the pioneers. We are setting a trend as far as the conservation is concerned. These are the areas which have been notified, but as of now more than 500 villages, they have set aside their forest as a conservation. They are having their own set of rules, their own set of guidelines. I have been to some of those areas, and it gives extreme satisfaction when you see the few young boys, they act as volunteers to ensure that their conserved area is saved from the poaching, hunting or illegal felling. So this is our strength, and it is this strength which gives hope for us that in time to come our state is going to do much better than most part of the country, and maybe we will be one of the standing examples across the globe. With these words, I request and I call upon all of you that when you go back to your area, your village, please exhort people that the environment is a common property resource. It is not something which can be kept under lock and key in one room and can be taken care of. It is open. Everyone has direct access to it, and everyone's action has an impact, good or bad, on the conservation. Of course, because of change in the schedule of the
From the Foundation for Ecological Security, the regional office in Guwahati, and greetings from FES to all of you. And thank you very much to the Honorable PCC for allowing us this opportunity to present what we worked on. I'll just give you a brief idea of what we are going to. I'll give you a brief idea of what we are hoping to present in this. As most of you who have come here already have a copy of the document that is to be released. Much of the material that is in the document will be presented here. But in addition to that, what we try to talk about is the process by which we came about to bring this on. But firstly, I must acknowledge that for FES it was a huge honor and an immensely important opportunity to be able to work with the State Biodiversity Board in Nagaland and with GIZ to come up with this document. FES has been working in Nagaland for some time, but this document and our inputs in this and the Biodiversity Strategic Action Plans was a key issue that at the Rio Summit, and which eventually led to the National Environmental Policy in 2006. And when we finally came upon a National Biodiversity Action Plan for the country in 2008. This action plan was updated in 2014 in line with the Aichi Biodiversity Targets, the 20 Aichi Biodiversity Targets. As the Honorable PCC has already said, in 2005, like all the states needed to make their state biodiversity strategy action plan. And in 2005, the biodiversity strategic action plan for Nagaland was already in existence. And it was felt that there was a need to revise and update the existing Nagaland biodiversity strategy action plan. And that is where FES as an organization came in, and in partnership with GIZ and the Biodiversity Board, we came in. Next, please. So, we felt that there were three major areas that we need to be addressing if we are to be revising this. So, one of those, the main thing was that the focus was going to be on aligning with the global and national targets. So the first thing was that the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets needed to be addressed very clearly in this revised action plan. Second was about the Convention on Biological Diversity Rio Summit, and also the NSBSAP targets that are the national targets, while also keeping it in consonance with the National Environmental Policy. Secondly, what had already been done in 2005 was that there was a document that was specific for Nagaland, but we felt that over time things had changed, and various socio-cultural contexts specific to Nagaland, state-specific laws and acts, and various issues that are very particular to Nagaland on land governance system, local village institutions, all these issues needed to be included so that the plan includes the current realities of the legal complexities that is there for Nagaland. Finally, we also felt that there were various issues that had emerged, various threats to biodiversity that had emerged over time since 2005. And as you know, apart from issues like species extinction and issues with water scarcity, invasive species and climate change were issues that have come into prominence much more in the recent times. And while some of these issues had been addressed to some extent in the previous plan, but we felt that we need to make a more overtly, clearly visible how these issues can be tackled. Next, please. So, I'll just briefly go through two slides of methodology to just give you an idea of how we went about it. So the information that is there in this document was primarily done through a primary data collection and secondary data collection. For primary data collection, it included consultation workshops with a range of stakeholders. At the end of the presentation, I'll provide a list of all the people with whom we consulted. So we had consultation workshops with officials of the Forest Department and NGOs. We worked with various different organizations who are already working on conservation issues. Some of them were from outside Nagaland also. And then we also met with various community representatives from the villages, and we organized workshops in which they were allowed to express what their views were on what are the threats to biodiversity and how those can be addressed. Then, most importantly, we had discussions and interviews with officials and representatives from the various government departments, academic institutions. So we felt that meeting with other line departments and understanding their points of views in this was also very, very crucial. The secondary data collection went by reviewing of existing scientific literature and the legal aspects of new schemes, policies that were relevant to the national biodiversity targets. Reports that were not really journal papers, but apart from that, there were a lot of grey literature that had come out of surveys that had been done. So we wanted to get a hold of as much information that had come out on biodiversity and various other related issues for this. Next, please. So the progression that we adopted was that initially we consulted the outcomes from a Wildlife Institute of India workshop that was conducted in WI. This workshop was conducted specifically to provide a bit more guidance in terms of how these state biodiversity action plans could be made across India. So a certain guiding, helpful points came out of that workshop, which we tried to adopt while making this document. So all the hard work that had gone into that first plan, and to ensure that those issues that stay in this plan also. So we tried to do a prioritization and elimination of some things that can remain. Action plans that national biodiversity action plan strategies that were adopted for mountain areas, because Nagaland, as you all know, is largely a mountain.
Biodiversity strategy and action plan on this particular occasion, and we had collaborated with GIZ. As I stated before, the GIZ is the technical wing of the German government under the bilateral relation. And since the GIZ and the German government were the one who had supported with the publication, the documentation and the publication of the strategy action plan, we took this privilege of inviting them over. And from the German government, from the Embassy of Germany, from Delhi, our respected consular had also been present, even though there was a slight delay in that, but we are so thankful and we are very grateful and fortunate to have you here, because you had agreed and you had insisted that you would like to be a part of the celebration. So that is what holds dear for us. Your participation means a lot more to us. I would like to welcome all the different institutions, starting with the allied departments. When we started with the documentation process and the revision process of having him here to officially release the booklet. So we are thankful and we are very grateful to you, sir, for you having been here. I also welcome all the different institutions, especially the college students, preserving our rich biodiversity. So your knowledge about what is to come and how your responsibilities are, that is very important at an initial and a young stage if you are aware.
Thank you, sir. May I also have the honor to request Dr. Antje Seeberger, Counselor, Head of Environment Affairs, German Embassy, New Delhi, to kindly rise up and accept our token of love. Thank you, ma'am. I also request Sri Dharmendra Prakash, IFS, PCCF and Head of Forest Force to kindly stand and accept this token of love and appreciation. We are being informed that due to some unavoidable circumstances, he has left the event. However, our gratitude goes to him as well. May I request Ms. Im Tien Lao, IFS Deputy Director General of Forest, MOEFCC, RO Shillong, to kindly accept our token of love and appreciation. Thank you. With that presentation, we now move on to listen to the keynote address to be delivered by Sri Satya Prakash Tripathi, IFS.
The world, nation, our state was less, there were sufficient natural resources available to meet present generation as well as future generation. In the decade of 1970s and 80s, the global community started thinking sustainable development, which means continuous improvement in the social, environmental, and economic condition of the people at the local level, national level, regional level, and global level. Sustainable development implies that achievement in the economic field, in the social field, without any damage to the environment and any loss of the natural resources. In 1970s, the global community started thinking how to limit growth, because it was having adverse effect on environment, and it was thought how do we have a balance between development and environment. In the Conference of United Nations for Human and Environment in 1972 at Stockholm, a decision was taken, and then within the United Nations organization, United Nations Environment Program, another organization was formed. The emphasis was that to liberate human beings with the perils of the environment, and that has been created by human being itself.
The
very much for choosing your quote. They are truly the voice of we the Nagas. Such melody and tuning, may your voice equal to places abroad. Through the
Farhad, and I am from the GIZ India country office in New Delhi, and I represent the technical cooperation part of Indo-German Development Cooperation, which actually comes in two sizes. Another agency by the name of KFW also happens to work in Nagaland. They, along with GIZ, we comprise implementing agency on behalf of the German government. The country director, Dr. Julie Ribier, who a couple of years ago had the opportunity to visit Nagaland, couldn't be here today, but I stand in for her and I deliver a few messages from her side. GIZ has been now in the Northeast and especially in Nagaland for over a decade. I had the good fortune of being part of the first mission that actually developed a project that went on to become what we used to call the Climate Change Adaptation in the Northeastern Region project. It was with the Ministry of Donor, and of course Nagaland was one of the participating states. That was back in 2010, about a decade later. GIZ has grown. I'm pretty sure Nagaland has also grown in terms of what it does and what it hopes to achieve. We are now about something like 45 active projects with about 15 ministries in the government of India. These are in turn supported by an increasing number of ministries on the German side. We have, of course, the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, we have the Ministry of Economy, and then we have the Ministry of Environment. And we have the good fortune of having Dr. Antje Berger, who represents the ministry, to be among us today. When you look at the different topics of strategic interest, you're always struck by what is in it for Germany. We keep getting asked this question: why does Germany work in India? Why does it work in biodiversity? Why does it work in Nagaland, for instance? And here we need to appreciate that as issues have become more complex, so have the search for solutions. And some of these now are of global importance. If you look at biodiversity, if you look at climate change, they're not matters that an individual government or one country can afford to try and resolve by itself. Hence the need for international cooperation. Most recently, there was what we call a cabinet consultation where heads of state, so Honorable Prime Minister, met with Honorable Chancellor Olaf Scholz out in Germany on the 2nd of May, and they entered into something we now call the Indo-German Green and Sustainable Development Partnership. This has all the content that is required for future development, and it gives us direction, it keeps us on track, especially with the Sustainable Development Goals. Just on the point of the occasion of the day, that we are here to release the Nagaland State Biodiversity Action Plan and Strategy. One is you have to ask yourself, why do we bother with these? Why do we plan? Why do we strategize? And the other question that you should concern yourself is, when is it that they actually work? And what plan can you think of which works really well? And you'll see there are certain characteristics, and I'll just leave a few thoughts behind on that. So the need to plan is actually to be able to remain focused on track. Otherwise, for small states with limited resources, we don't know what to put it down on first. There's so many developmental needs and there are limited resources. If you don't have a plan, you could use up your resources and time and then not know if you've actually achieved anything at all or not. And the second part, how do you know that they actually work? And here the most important ingredient is ownership. The plan is not of GIZ or of the Forest Department or of FES who have to draft it. It's the plan of the people of Nagaland. And so ownership becomes really important. The other is not enough just to say I own the plan of the state biodiversity strategy and action plan. It needs means for implementation. And now that it's going to get released, we will have to examine it to see what means are required in terms of people, resources, funding to actually make it work. And the final ingredient is actually feedback. If you don't have monitoring loops, if you don't get feedback on does this plan work for the people who live in Nagaland all over the state, you never know whether you made a good plan, you never know whether it's on track. So monitoring and feedback become really important to know the success of a plan. The government of Germany, which resulted in the project that we're all part of, the Ministry of Donor, who were our original partners but continue to support us. Of course, the government of Nagaland, we're always very grateful for your hospitality, and of course my own GIZ colleagues for helping to put this together. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir, for your presence and for your wonderful message. We are also honored to have Dr. N.T.A.C. Berger, Counselor, Head of Environmental Affairs, German Embassy, New Delhi, as one of our guests of honors. Ma'am, you may please take your time.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Minister Sri Konyak, thank you very much for the invitation on behalf of the government of Nagaland, all other dignitaries and excellencies, representatives of government, civil society, academia, students, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues from GIZ and friends. We are really happy to be here with one day delay. Last year we could not celebrate International Biodiversity Day because of the pandemic, and this year it was heavy rain who hindered us to come in time. So thank you very much for changing and making it able that we could participate. Faraz has already nicely introduced our Indo-German cooperation. So my name is Antje Corinna Berger. Please feel free to call me Anna or Anshi, since I know that my name is difficult to pronounce. I am seconded by the BMU, the Ministry for Environment in Germany. I have also worked for the GIZ and I have worked for the ICI, the International Climate Initiative. And I'm very proud that one of the ICI projects supported this really important outcome, the revised Nagaland State Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. India and Germany have been working closely together for many years to protect biodiversity, natural resources, and vulnerable communities from the impact of climate change and to achieve the SDGs. As my colleague Faraz already rightly pointed out, on the 2nd of May, Prime Minister Modi and Chancellor Olaf Scholz signed this important partnership on green and sustainable development. They pledged that they have a strong commitment on both sides on the implementation of the Paris Agreement, the SDGs, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. This year's slogan of the International Biodiversity Day is "Building a Shared Future for All." I would like to add together. Together we can build a shared future for all life. Biodiversity remains the key answer to several sustainable development challenges. From nature-based solutions to climate, health issues, food and water security, and sustainable livelihood. Biodiversity is the foundation upon which we can build, and we want this and we must this, upon we can build a shared future for all life. Two of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots are located in the northeastern region of India, the Himalayas and the Indo-German biodiversity hotspots to which Nagaland belongs. The Indo-German hotspot is one of the environments on planet Earth under the highest threats. Thus, the launch today of the revised Nagaland Biodiversity and Strategy Action Plan is a great step towards maintaining this unique landscape and its management. The revision of the strategy and action plan, making sure it aligns with the SDGs and the key target, as well anticipating the upcoming biodiversity framework for the next decade, was supported, as already said, by the IKI project Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in a Growing Landscape. This project is a global project. It is jointly implemented by the GIZ in India, Kenya and Tajikistan with their national partners, in India with the Ministry of Donor. So the Indian part was the best example for the other two countries, for Kenya and for Tajikistan, of course also vice versa, but India really had an important role in that, especially Nagaland. Nature provides the genetic material for agricultural crops. However, according to the fourth Global Biodiversity Outlook, the flagship publication of the Convention on Biological Biodiversity, agriculture is responsible for 70% of biodiversity loss. 52% of agriculture areas are affected by degradation caused by inappropriate production methods. The IKI project aimed to boost knowledge on increasing biodiversity and sustainable use of ecosystems in agriculture. And the project proved that agricultural practices can have a positive effects on biodiversity and ecosystems. And especially here in Nagaland, enhanced shifting cultivation practices have the potential to promote biodiversity and ecosystem services, permanently improve agricultural production and resilience to the effects of climate change. The project generated awareness and strengthened the capacity of germ optimization and intensification measures, which contributes to promoting biodiversity and ecosystem services while ensuring food and livelihood securities of the farmers. The project engaged in a constant exchange between practitioners, scientists, academia, and policymakers. Frequently, the deepest knowledge is found in the communities of the most vulnerable. The project was able to give them a voice, to learn and to teach, while improving livelihoods and feeding into policies and national agendas. At the same time, scientific support ensures appropriate measures for long-term impact. It is an intersectoral approach and the constant dialogue that can further and root our impacts appropriately and sustainable. Also, this project will come to an end by the end of this year. I'm happy that we have a new upcoming IKI project. It's called Protection and Sustainable Management of Aquatic Resources in the Northern Eastern Himalaya region of India, NERAC, also funded by the German government and implemented by the GIZ. And it will continue its efforts in the northern region of India in the states of Nagaland, Meghalaya, Assam and Manipur. At the end of my speech, I would again like to thank the government of Nagaland for inviting me, my colleagues from the GIZ for supporting me, especially Kenneth, who made sure that everything went so smooth, and Kiki, I learned that she was the mastermind here. Thank you so much. And I wish us all a very successful event. I heard that this morning already went very successful, and continued cooperation between India and Germany. And together we can build a shared future for all life. I thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the enlightenment. The third speaker as guest of honor is Sri James Pangsang Kongkal Sangma, Honorable Minister for Forest, Environment and Climate Change, Meghalaya. His speech through a video clip, for which I
Honorable Forest Minister of Nagaland, Mrs. Pangon Ponyak, Honorable MP Jotsoma, Dr. Antje Berger, the Councillor Head of Environmental Affairs, German Embassy, Mr. Satyaprakash Tripathi, Chairman of the Nagaland State Biodiversity Board, Mr. Dharmendra Prakash, PCCF Hof, Nagaland, Ms. Intiela Au, Deputy Director General of Forests, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, and other esteemed participants. It is indeed a pleasure to once again be able to participate in this forum, which is being organized by the GIZ. The last program on the Community Management Plan implemented in Malai Somat in East Khasi Hills gave me such a great opportunity to look at the work being done by the GIZ in my state. Today's topic is something that I'm extremely passionate about. Why? Because the Northeast region represents one of the most significant ecological cache for our nation and enjoys a coveted global biodiversity heritage and reputation, at par with many unique ecological hotspots in the world like the Galapagos Islands. We form one of the biggest carbon sinks for India, and this would prove crucial for India to realize its Paris Accord pledges, and investment in our environment and ecology is critical for India to cement its climate action leader status in the world. It is also true at the same time that our fragile geography makes us vulnerable and places us right on the front lines of climate change. Geopolitically speaking, climate change is one of the biggest civilizational challenges that will reconfigure and recalibrate the hard power and growth calculations in the world. And the same is true for subnational leadership and states in India. However, I feel that we, government and people alike, are still struggling with grasping the cataclysmic effect that climate change will unsparingly have on all of us. Ernest Hemingway said something in one of his books which is somewhat applicable to the situation we find ourselves in vis-a-vis climate change. In his book, the gentleman asks the other person, "How did you go bankrupt?" And the reply comes, "Gradually and then suddenly." As per the IPCC status and Code Red warning for humanity, we have now swiftly moved into the suddenly status. A 2-degree warmer world is a reality that is inching closer and closer and closer. Consider these numbers: 200 million refugees, crop failures putting 600 million people at risk, an inhuman heat wave with projection of 150 million deaths. It is said that the Syrian war that gave rise to a tidal wave of populism was a result of a severe drought. 23% of the world's crises in ethnic diverse regions were correlated to weather events, and 70% of all war happens due to a climate-related event. Every inaction of ours is weaponizing the climate system and nature to go to war with us. And protecting our biodiversity and Earth's nature cycles is the only way out. In multiple forums that we have attended in the last few months on dialoguing and intellectualizing the solutions to arrest climate change and saving our biodiversity, most acutely faced by biodiverse regions like Northeast India or, for that matter, my state of Meghalaya, the real question we observe is often not on the table. In many of the forums I have attended, the cognitive bargain that we are making as governments and people is to think of energy transition as the only weapon to counter climate change. Rather, we should be addressing the causal issue of predatory economics, which I believe is the driving force behind the ecological degradation of our planet. There is a narrative and intellectual collapse on the articulation of the real problem, which is simply this: that a destabilized climate is the cost of deregulated global capitalism, its unintended yet unavoidable consequence. Environmental problems can be seen as the outcome of a market where destroying the earth is absent from prices set by the marketplace. It is externalizing the cost of destroying nature, which brings me to the core solution, that we need a new development and growth model for our biodiversity and nature, and for the Northeast especially. We need to have nature and biodiversity economics in place. We in Meghalaya are boldly experimenting with a new economic doctrine called the environment state, where we are activating a slew of nature and conservation economic models and prototyping radical innovations. Our vision is to turn the Northeast region into a climate action zone and eco-laboratory of sorts for the world, and a green Silicon Valley, you may call it, where nature economics is at play. From sourcing to ways to build a new biodiversity heat map for evaluating and mapping our ancient biodiversity heritage, to issuing biopatents for our living root bridges, which you all know about, and legislating and banking for nature, we are nurturing a new playbook of biodiversity economics and what we like to call a conservative and regenerative economy. We have successfully, very lately, started a river rejuvenation project after a short pilot phase with an algae-based phycoremediation project, and we are going to expand this based on nature-based solutions. We have to look at restoration and protection of our nature and biodiversity as a climate regulation mechanism and look at solutions within. These ancient natural ecosystems perform very valuable public service for humanity. But having said that, I also look at preservation of our biodiversity in terms of our crop biodiversity, and thereby also looking at another angle to all this in terms of food security and how this is also having a huge impact on our environment. So for this, we have in our humble way started community seed banks specifically for identification and preservation of our indigenous rice species, which will then receive special focus and support in government schemes. As a matter of fact, some of these rice varieties date back to thousands of years. We have also launched payment ecosystem services as a pilot in our region. And we are also toying with the idea of raising a volunteer army for conservation or climate core, and thinking of conservation basic income for incentivizing the public for protection of our forests, our rivers, and biodiversity ecosystems. And no, it is not a market trade-off or something that is slowing down our development. There is massive green capital available, and there is a global shift towards new financial instruments for the preservation of nature. There was an interesting article that I came across recently which spoke about Pakistan's Nature Performance Bond, which is designed by the Finance for Biodiversity Initiative, an initiative that strives to factor biodiversity into financial innovation. Pakistan's nature-based Nature Performance Bond would be tied to meet nature-based targets. Under this scheme, a creditor country may write off a portion of the newly issued debt or reduce repayment interest rates if biodiversity and nature restoration targets are achieved. In essence, we have to think of the Northeast region as an environment state, where our nature and environment are the overarching theme for development and growth. That is the change in thinking that we are in urgent need of. It is time for the governments like us to reimagine our role as the guiding lights of the sustainable world order and put this new economic and social reimagination in place. I am an optimist, and I'm hopeful that my colleagues from the Northeast will join hands to usher in this new paradigm, to, in our own small way, play our part in terms of conservation of our biodiversity. I also look forward to many more collaborations with the GIZ to join us in our fight against climate change. Thank you for this lovely opportunity and for this opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you to GIZ and the government of Nagaland. Jai Hind.
I am extremely happy to be with you on the eve of observation of the International Day for Biological Diversity 2022, having a theme, building a shared future for all life. The word biodiversity is a combination of two words, biological life, and diversity. It's referred to the variety of life and on the earth and encompasses all the living things that exist in a certain area, in air, on land, or in water, plants, animals, microorganisms, fungi, etc. Biological diversity, therefore, refers to the variety and variability amongst living organisms and the ecological complex in which they occur. Diversity can be defined as the number of different items and their relative frequency. The state of Nagaland is very rich in biodiversity, having variety of fauna and flora. Nagaland have for a large number of plant species which are endemic to the state or the northeast part of India. The state is having tallest rhododendron 108 feet, tallest patty 9.2 feet, and hottest Raja chili, a variety of medicinal plants, orchids, bamboos, wild edible fruits, ornamental plants, animals, birds, fish, domesticated cattle, agro and horticultural biodiversity. Biodiversity resources are required to be nurtured for their sustainable supply for our future generation. But this has not been done due to one or either reason. Thus, the policy and planning mechanism in every sphere of development should accommodate the concept aspect of biological conservation. Taking into account the importance of biodiversity for survival and wellness of human beings, World Leader signed Convention on Biological Diversity (CPCT), which came in the force on the 29th December 1993. In December 2000, the United Nations General Assembly adopted 22nd May as the International Day of Biodiversity. The International Day of Biodiversity is commemorated to increase understanding and awareness of biodiversity issues. India is one of 175 countries that are signatory of CPT. There is the need of the work together and establish certain policy and guidelines to achieve all the objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity and also to protect developing biodiversity resources. All signatories of the Convention of Biological Diversity from strategies and action plan for obtaining the objective of Convention on Biodiversity. In 1999, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India prepared the national policy and micro-level action strategies on biodiversity through a consultation process for effective implementation of Convention on Biological Diversity. As a follow-up of the micro-level action strategy on biodiversity, detailed action plan on biodiversity were made at the national level and the state level. The National Biodiversity Strategy and Action NPAB was prepared in 2008. The Department of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the Center of Environment Study Northeastern Health University in Shillong in 2005 jointly prepared state-level biodiversity strategy and action plan for Nagaland, known as NSBSAP. There has been development a corporate-level, national-level sustainable development goal 17 number and achieved targeted 20 number came into timeline. The National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan was revised in 2014, taking all development into account.
NSBSAP.
Downward level.
Involved in the consultation process. Personally, a big thank goes to the team from the Nagaland Biodiversity Board, and here I would like to especially mention a name, Ms. Savino. If she's somewhere there, then I would ask her to stand up. She was the driving force behind this entire organization, organizing this work.
Now, I will just breeze through in terms of today we have been hearing right from the morning session and as well as now why we are doing this Biodiversity Action Plan and how it is coming to the ground level in terms of implementation. Everyone here, we will have this in doubt, how can I contribute? I am a stakeholder too, but we all talk big things, it is coming from the ministry, from the global level. At the local level, what do we do about it? Okay, how can there be some contribution from my side, if at all I have to be, and how is that I take up ownership to certain things involved in the Biodiversity Action Plan. So in this sense, what I'll do is I'll just breeze through in terms of what mandate it is coming from, so that we can get a pictorial view of what was said today. It is mostly summarization. And then I will just take you through a different things that are happening across the country in terms of how people have utilized certain legislative functions or legislative powers and then contributed towards biodiversity conservation, which also indirectly or directly feeds into the Biodiversity Action Plan, at least to the National Biodiversity Action Plan. So next one please. So this is mostly the walkthrough I am taking you. We'll look at the mandate, the BMCs, and then the roles and responsibilities and some case studies we'll look into. So next one. So as Sir was telling in the last session, if you look at it, we have a lot of international conventions. Okay, Ramsar Convention is there, CMA, CITES, ITBGFRA, CBD, UNCCD, UNFCCC, so on and so forth. Then at the national level, to have this mandate, we have different policy frameworks that have come into picture. And to actually have a ground implementation, we have legislative frameworks which comprises of all the Environment Acts, Forest Acts, NGT, so on and so forth. But most importantly, what I would like to highlight today is the Biodiversity Act, because this gives a clear-cut mandate at the ground level, at the community level, to encourage participation, because unless there is a participation, we will not achieve anything. Next one, please. So this is the main objectives. So still conservation, sustainable use, and fair and equitable sharing. This is a very important part. And then if you look at it, next one. It's okay, next one. Yeah. So what is the implementation and architecture for this biodiversity per se? At the national level, you have National Biodiversity Authority supported by the non-government stakeholders as well as central line ministries. Then at the state level, we have State Biodiversity Board, who are again horizontally supported by the state line departments as well as NGOs, CSOs, as well as the industry. Then at the local level, we have the biodiversity management committees, which again supported by the local line agencies, as well as Panchayat Raj institutions and other local institutions. So this is how it will be implemented, and that is where the mandate comes from. So we have an institutional structure in place. Next one. Next. Go on. So at the local level, we have BMCs, then state biodiversity boards and national authorities there, National Biodiversity Authority, which has regulatory, advisory and facilitative function at the national level. Next one. Then the same functions for the state biodiversity at the state level, and biodiversity management committees have a different role. They do not actually regulate. Next one. They actually support and facilitate as well as document all the biodiversity which is available in the local areas. Next one. Next please. So this BMC is not only an institute, but it's a statutory body. It's not only statutory, but it's also an autonomous body. So that in this particular legislation, what we have seen now, National Biodiversity Authority, State Board, as well as